Hello and welcome to Carnivorist Chats. My name is James, your host. I started this podcast to help other folks share their own healing stories and to interview thought leaders and experts in the carnivore, keto, and low oxalate space. Before we begin, I'd like to give a shout out to Equip Foods and the Carnivore Bar. As an affiliate, you can use the link in the show notes to get a discount on their products when you check out using the code Carnivorist. Thanks in advance for listening, subscribing, and any likes or shares. And now, on with the podcast.
Hello, everyone. It's James, your host of Carnivorist Chats. It's season 3, episode 3. And I have, and this is going to rhyme, I'm a poet, I don't even know it, the plant-free MD in the place to be. I've got Dr. Anthony Chaffee returning. Dr. Chaffee, what an honor and a privilege it is to have you back on Carnivorist Chats.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. It's good to see you.
Likewise, my friend. Dr. Chaffee, I mentioned to you briefly off the air a minute ago that our first episode we did together is definitely my most watched one. So thanks again for taking the time out earlier this year to discuss. We even did a little bit of a Q&A at the end of that one, which folks found very helpful, so much so that I asked you and you very kindly agreed to come back on to do more of a Q&A based episode this time. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Happy to.
Dr. Chaffee, before we begin, let's just catch up with you. You've had a busy year, as you always do. I mean, between, your residency and medical and dealing with clients on your own and your own practice, and you've been doing a lot of traveling. And what really interested me was that you journeyed out to visit Maggie, who you interviewed, and went out to Canada to visit her on her ranch. Please tell the listeners about that experience.
Yeah, well, that was great. So Maggie is an 82-year-old lady, and she 82 years young lady, and she is, she was on my podcast because she wanted to talk about the infrastructure with cattle production, how that's being driven out and destroyed, and how we can tell everybody that meat's the way to go and get everybody wanting to eat healthy, but then who's gonna grow the cattle, who's gonna produce this, because cattle producers are getting fewer and far between. And so that's why she came on. She had a lot of very good insights. And one thing that has really struck people is that she's 82 and she's been a carnivore for really all of her life, but at least the last 65 to 70 years when she's been living as an adult. And she is fantastically healthy. She looks half her age, if that, and she moves like a healthy 30-year-old. She's climbing up and down tractors and farm equipment, climbed up the mast of a sailboat, a little small sort of little thing, and grabbed the thing, came down. I mean, fast. She was just zip up, zip down, and even hopped over a 5-foot tall fence to get in and corral a raging bull, like an actual raging bull. This thing was huge. It was a growler. It was the biggest bull I've ever seen in my entire life. Like people at a rodeo would take one look at that and be like, no, absolutely not. It probably ate the other bulls at the rodeo. This thing was huge. And so, and she just hopped over just without a second thought. Like, growl, come on. It's like starts grabbing him and all that sort of stuff. And that was great. It was really nice to see her and her husband, Mac. They're both lovely people, and see what it's like to be on a working ranch. She's worked on ranches and had her own ranch for all of her adult life. And she, at 82, still is up out in the fields at 5 a.m. every day and working until after dark. They just use all the daylight they have. And then, if they have doing stuff around the house, they got big floodlights to, like, on the calving pens, and, they're mucking things out and clearing things and rebuilding things and doing all sorts of stuff well after dark. If they're baling hay, you just bale hay until the hay's done. And at one point, she said a couple of years ago, she personally went for 36 hours straight without a break and without food the whole time, 36 hours. And she was probably 80, 81 at that time. So it's a real testament to just how healthy we are supposed to be as we age, and how robbed we and our loved ones have been as a result of eating this crap that people are perpetuating and making trillions of dollars a year off of, from selling us the food and then selling us the medicines that have to sort of try to stick us together like tape from the damage they cause us. So that was great. It was great to see her. It was great to see Mac and just be out on the farm and relax a bit and play with cows.
I can only imagine. I went back prior to chatting today and re-listened to that episode that you did with her.
Mhm.
And she's such a sweetheart when you listen to her on the episode. You can only imagine what she's like in person. But it made me smile. And it's a good thing you're, strong gentleman with broad shoulders, because she, as she often said in the podcast, she was dumping this onus on you to get the message out there. And I'm sure you guys talked about that again. I mean, it was
Mhm.
quite a, let's say, a sobering interview in the fact that she was talking about the fact that it's great for us all to be promoting the carnivore diet, but what's going to happen if the beef isn't available, if there's not people in the abattoirs, if there's not the veterinarians coming to and the farmers? What came out of, if any, of that discussion, Dr. Chaffee? I know you had put up also a little bit of a fundraiser for her prior to that visit. How's it going with Maggie in that regard?
So, well, that's the thing, because it's getting more and more difficult to be a rancher. They make almost no money as a community of ranchers. So there was a study that looked at the average, independent rancher and how much they get paid for all of their work, 14, 16, 36 hours at a time. And they get paid on average 41 cents an hour for all of their work, right? Maggie doesn't even get that because her ranch is losing money. And so it's been losing money yearly. And so she's actually using her retirement and her pension, her and her husband's retirement and pension, to actually keep things afloat, even though, she's producing quite a lot of beef and very, prized bulls and breeding bulls and things like that. So she has very, very good products, and she's been doing this for a very long time. But it is a very difficult endeavor, and people are just losing money. And that's why they're just switching their fields to, cash crops like, corn and soy and canola or whatever. So that was difficult. And especially because the hay prices have tripled this year in her area because there was a drought. And so now now there's not nearly as much hay available. So it's harder to come by, and it's 3 times as dear. And so she was faced with not being able to afford that. For a while, she was hemorrhaging a lot of money. They were able to sort of tighten that up. And now she's only losing a little bit amount of money. They're nearly breaking even, but you triple the prices, that nearly breaking even that's not going to cut it. And so she was she was basically faced with the prospect of having to sell half her herd. So 40, 50 cows, and which would have been a very big hit. That herd size is now half, and it takes many, many, many years to build that back up. And the cows that you're keeping to rebuild your herd, you're not selling. So, it's just knock-on effect year after year of losing money and having problems. So it was either that or sell off another chunk of land, because that's another thing she was doing, because the land's very valuable. And, so when they're sort of getting in more and more debt, and they have to just sell a chunk of land and get out of debt. And okay, then they build up the debt and then sell a chunk of land and build up the debt and sell a chunk of land. And that's how, these people are losing all their land and all their property and their livelihood. And these ranchers are going out of business. There was in that interview, if I'm not mistaken, she said that the year before, fully 1/3 of the cattle producers in Canada had gone under. And so there were, 1/3 of the people trying to produce beef up in Canada. And then that's difficult. So she was sort of faced with that again, that being hit again with that. So Maggie and Mac are two of the most genuinely kind people I've ever seen in my entire life. Just hearing their stories and seeing them interact with people. I mean, they genuinely care about people, regardless of who they are and regardless of the nasty things that those people may have done to them or others. They just want to help people, and they're going to be happy and healthy, happy and helpful no matter what, which is great, because they're sort of bulletproof emotionally at that point. People try to tear people down, and it only works if you let it, and you let it hurt you. And it doesn't hurt them. They just want to help people, and they're just good, kind, nice people. And it's like, if there's anybody on this earth that deserves a helping hand, it was them. And so I started this Give, Send, Go campaign. So not GoFundMe, but Give, Send, Go. And it's just Give, Send, Go / Please Help Maggie, Maggie. And we're trying to raise $50,000 Canadian to try to get this sorted out, so that she doesn't have to sell half her herd or lose another chunk of land. And that's going really well. We're sort of 3/4, 4/5 of the way to the goal, which is really amazing. Everyone's been so generous and so kind. And then also working with her, and other people have come out and said, oh, and that's another thing. With people that donate $1,000 Canadian or more, they get invited to stay on the ranch for 5 days and do like a ranch stay for 5 days and just see what it's like, living on a farm and working. They're able to come out and work with Maggie and Mac and help out, or just watch, or play with the cows, or just enjoy a peaceful time in a little guest cabin. It's nothing fancy. My girlfriend Elle and we stayed there, and I absolutely loved it. And so people are able to do that. And then a lot of people were able to come out and just give ideas. Say, hey, look, I can't donate money, but I'd love to buy beef from her. Now, she doesn't sell direct beef to consumers. She's more breeding bulls and breeding heifers and things like that. That's her sort of business model. But that there was enough people doing that, and there was another ranch in BC who's also a regenerative ranch that has switched to that model. Well, actually only did that model because they were sort of in business, and then they just decided to be ranchers. And so they came from a business-minded point of view and said, okay, well, how do we do this? Well, we're not just going to do this cow-calf thing, because that's just, you're getting completely screwed by the big meat producers. So we're just going to go direct to customer. So it just cut out all the middleman. And so they're doing well. And so that's a sustainable model. And I think that is the future. What do we do? How do we sustain, maintain, and propagate the cattle industry, the beef industry, and have that be something that's available for us tomorrow as you get more independent ranchers like Maggie and others just selling direct to consumer, and having people understand that and trying to buy their beef directly from these people. And where your beef's coming from, how good it is, it's just not using a bunch of chemicals and sprays and hormones and whatever. You're just getting just real meat on a regeneratively raised ranch that's going to have a lot more nutrients in it. And that's going to be much better for you. It's going to be much better for them. And so they're helping her sort of change her ranch to accommodate that and start selling direct to people. And hopefully that is able to generate more money and get them much more financially stable, so they don't run into these problems in the future. And hopefully other ranchers take that and develop it themselves, and this just becomes a bigger industry of just directly going to the consumer, so that we both end up benefiting and just cut out the big meat packers, and they can go do something else.
So commendable of you, Dr. Chaffee. And I will post that link in the show notes of this episode so folks can donate. That's a huge thing, especially since I follow along with your book club, even though I'm not an official member. When you post the books that you're reading, I try and get to them as I can. So I'm reading, or rereading rather now, Sacred Cow. I'm a little bit behind by Rob Wolf and Diana Rogers, and it speaks to the importance of well-raised beef. So go out there, folks, support your local rancher if you have one. In Bermuda, it's a little tougher for us. We don't have any abattoirs here, although we have dairy farms, but just it speaks to the importance of having ranchers in the ecosystems. And read Sacred Cow if you haven't, please. It's a great book. Dr. Chaffee, before we jump into the Q&A, one last little thing. I also posted recently the YouTube link for the debate with yourself and Dr. Saladino. I mentioned to you that it was such a great conversation between two doctors and adults, and I emphasize adults, conversing about our diets, where we came from, what we're supposed to eat, what we're eating as individuals now. And I just wanted to commend you on that, and just get your little brief feedback on how that was, and if you have any further debates, quote unquote, coming up that we should be aware of.
Well, I mean, I really didn't even feel like it was a debate. It was just like you say, two adults just having a conversation and speaking about where we differ. And that's fine. You don't want to be in an echo chamber. You don't want to be in a situation where everybody agrees with every word you say and you agree with everything they say, because that's a cult. That doesn't exist in the real world, right? So, I like that there are different opinions. You want 1,000 voices, everyone talking, everyone communicating and conversing, because the good ideas are going to come to the top. and you're going to be able to talk about them and defend them, and that the ones that aren't that good, aren't really able to be defended, they go away. And so that's fine. And so you want to have those conversations. I have a lot of respect for Dr. Saladino, and I really liked the conversation. It was really nice to talk to him. We got along very well. We agree on almost everything, and that's the thing. If we agree on 99% of things, that does, and people, oh, you got to debate this, that, and the other, and it's sort of like this, like you guys got to fight. It's like, we agree on 99% of things. Like that doesn't. If I agree with 99% of something with someone, that doesn't make them 1% my enemy. Like we're on the same side, So we can certainly talk about that, and we can certainly converse. And even people that are on the other spectrum, like the vegan vegetarian spectrum, we should be on the same side as far as health and people's well-being, and actual evidence-based research and scientifically based thoughts and logically based conclusions. Unfortunately, that's not necessarily the case. People don't care that all these people are improving and they're getting better and they're reversing their illnesses, because they want us to be wrong. And that sort of speaks to their mental state and where they're at as people. There is a debate coming up. It will be coming out on Lauren Knight's podcast channel. And that was not a friendly debate. That was with someone who was a vegan and, helped, look up all the different stats and things like that for Simon Hill's book. And, that was more frustrating than anything, just because, I tried to have a nice conversation with him. I tried to have it be like an adult friendly, like, hey, let's just talk about this and speak about this. And that was not what ended up happening. And they just tried to like nitpick at everything, and then didn't actually address his own glaring issues with the things that he brought up, and tried to cover over and smooth over like the different sorts of problems with his argument, and not bring them up. And anytime I tried to bring that up, he'd sort of interrupt me and go, oh, excuse me. I want to finish. Excuse me, and then I'm trying to talk something. He cuts in and interjects, and then I counterpose. Oh, excuse me. It's like, okay. So it was obviously, a different kind of discussion. And, I tried to be nice, and I tried to do all these sorts of things. On retrospect, I should have just absolutely torched him and just gone for the throat on every single point and not conceded an inch on anything. Lesson learned: if we go up again, I'm going to absolutely destroy this kid, or anyone else, because like obviously they're not trying to have an adult, reasonable conversation like Dr. Saladino and I did. They're just trying to score points. And fine, you want to do that? Good luck to you,
Dr. Chaffee. I'll just say that, from the listener's viewpoint, and I've been listening to you from the very beginning in my journey, we just appreciate the way you handle things. And irregardless of whether you agree or disagree with Dr. Saladino's stance on many things, you have to appreciate the way that he approaches things. He's always been a very, let's say, soft-spoken, yet, convinced in his beliefs person that just is also very respectful when he speaks to other folks. So I think, he's garnered a lot of followers because of his approach. And the same thing for you. You have garnered a whole host of people in the hundreds of thousands now, and close to millions across your platform, of people that just respect your approach, your non-dogmatic way of thinking. And it came across in that interview, not only to me, but I'm sure to many others. So we appreciate the way you handle things. And I do agree with you. When you give someone a chance, but they don't give you the same respect, go into the next one all guns blazing and just take them down. So we appreciate you, and thank you for that great episode, and hope there's more conversations to come with Dr. Saladino in the future.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah.
Dr. Chaffee, let's jump right into this Q&A, because I want to be honest with your time. You're a very busy gentleman. So we submitted some questions to folks to have you answer them. And I'm going to start off with the very first one. It is, and I'll tie it, it's a sort of a two-parter here. Your opinion on protein powders, which is a supplement, they're single ingredient, grass-fed, for example. And then how do we let go, if we're on supplementation, the idea of taking them in the first place?
Well, I don't take any supplements or protein. I mean, you don't need it. If you're just eating meat, you're going to get hundreds of grams of protein a day, and or as much as your body needs anyway. And so the only time that I would say, to have like a protein shake or something like that, is if you just can't get a meal and you're hungry and you're just on the run, you're like, okay, maybe I'll use something, but it's not ideal. I mean, you can really just wait, really, until you can get proper food. And yes, protein is important, but there's a lot of these other nutrients that come with meat, and that isn't just protein. You need a lot of things as well. So it's better to get that complete nutrition. There are protein powders that have just the protein, and I would never take a protein powder that had any sort of ingredients besides straight up animal protein. And so if there's like Equip Foods, who sponsor me, they've sent me some proteins, and they have a line that just is just beef isolate protein or just collagen. And so they sent that to me. So like in these instances where I'm in surgery from 6 a.m. and then work late and then doing interviews and then go to the gym, and it's like 11:30 at night, I've got to be up at 4 a.m. It's just like, I'm just going to take fine, I'll have just a protein shake and go to bed or something like that. I do that once 6 months, something like that, and so it's nice that I have that for that instance. But I don't think you need it. I don't think you need to take it if you're eating enough meat. If you're eating enough meat, you're going to get all the protein that you need. And I think that's the mindset you take into dropping the supplements entirely, is that you do get everything you need in the proportion that you need it, just from eating meat, just from eating steak, fatty meat. You need the fat. And that's the thing too. Some people shirk on the fat because they're like, well, I want to lose weight, I want to cut down, or okay, fine, but at the same time, fat is an essential nutrient. There are essential fatty acids that you have to have, and there are essential fat soluble vitamins and other nutrients that come in the fat that you have to have. So fat is an essential nutrient. It's not just a calorie source. And the idea of calories is pretty problematic as well. But steak has everything. If you're coming from a plant-based diet or a SAD diet, you are probably nutrient deficient. And if you get that tested and you have specific deficiencies, sure, supplement, top yourself up, and then keep going. But if you're just on a carnivore diet, and you've been on that for several years, you're going to be fine. If you are someone who has like the MTHFR gene mutation, and you don't, and you can't process folate and B12 properly, well, then maybe you just need to eat liver a couple times a week. That really is a supplement. That's our supplement for carnivores, just having a bit more liver. If you're deficient in something, add in some organs and you'll be fine. And so people that have low folate, even though they're eating a lot of red meat, they probably just need a bit of liver, once or twice a week, small amounts, don't need much. And so that's pretty much it. And so check your bloods. If you're deficient in something for whatever reason, sure, supplement. Start with liver. If that's not enough, try some more liver. If that's not enough, maybe take a dedicated supplement or something like that. Vitamin D, things like that. A lot of people are deficient in vitamin D. Vitamin D is not a vitamin, it's a hormone. It's actually a sex steroid, so it's very important. And most people are deficient in it. And that's why the reference ranges are too low. So even if you're in the reference range, you're probably too low. And so you want to get in the sun. You want to get in the sun without sunblock and everything like that. Vitamin D is actually UV protection. That's why it developed. And so that's why you produce it on the surface of your skin to block out UVB. And so we're blocking out UVB, and vitamin D forms there. Great. It takes about 6 to 8 hours to actually soak into your skin. And so if you take a shower and you wash yourself off after you go to the beach or you're in the pool or something like that, it's gone. So you're not going to absorb that. So quite a lot of people are short on vitamin D. So if you can't get out in the sun and you're not getting quite enough from fatty meat, because there is vitamin D in fatty meat, grass-fed butter, really grass-fed meat. So, depending on what you eat and where it's coming from, and if it's grain finished and all these sorts of things, may not have enough vitamin D. And if you're in the northern and southern latitudes and you're not getting enough sunshine, or just not getting enough sunshine anyway, because you're like me and you just work indoors all day like a bloody troglodyte and you can't get outside, then you might need to take some vitamin D. And if you are getting outside, make sure you get sunshine and you let it soak into your skin 6 to 8 hours. And so that's pretty much it. There's always little workarounds. There's generally things you can do with your food and your lifestyle that can improve. But at the end of the day, if you need to take a supplement, fine, but check. And if you don't, and your numbers are fine, then you definitely don't need to take a supplement. You don't need to take a supplement just to take a supplement.
The old test, don't guess. I love it. This next question ties exactly into that, and I will preface it very quickly for you on what my feedback is on this. And it was your thoughts on iodine and the thyroid, specifically the Lugol's drops, which I will tell folks on the vegan diet, my thyroid also went to hypo initially. Early on, I was struggling. They thought I might have had even the autoimmune side, which I didn't, but I definitely had hypothyroidism. And then I started taking iodine. And even in small amounts, it swung my thyroid right around to become hyper. And you have to be very careful with iodine supplementation, especially I was doing a tablet form. I welcome your thoughts on this, Dr. Chaffee, because so many folks are looking at iodine now. It's making a comeback.
Well, look, it's like all the other supplements. If you're deficient, then sure, take some iodine. But I don't like the idea of taking supplements if you haven't checked to see if you need them. If you're getting everything you need from food, then that's ideal. And so, if you check your iodine and it's perfectly normal, do you need to take it at all? If you're hypothyroid, one of the causes of that, one of major cause of that is low iodine. And so if you check your iodine, wow, that's low. I'm hypothyroid. Makes sense. We supplement, get you up into normal levels, but it's easy. People take a lot of these things. People are taking, thousands of milligrams of vitamin C a day. It was like, oh yeah, more is better. Well, at least what I was taught in medical school was after 2,500, 3,000 milligrams of vitamin C a day, it actually stops being an antioxidant, starts turning into an oxidant. It also metabolizes into oxalates. And so it actually starts being a problem. And so, when we have cancer patients on, what's referred to as ultra high doses of vitamin C, they're talking about 2,500 milligrams a day. Right. So that's like, and that's like 2 pills, like because most of these pills are like 1,000 milligram pills. So, you're taking chemo levels of vitamin C sometimes. And so that's a lot. Most people can do fine, tolerate iodine fine. Dr. Berry has a great video on iodine, and he talks about the Japanese and how they, because of their diet, they have massive amounts of iodine because of all the fish and seafood and things like that they have. And they seem to do okay, but you can have other problems. You can get hyper, you can sort of shock your system, and if your TSH is up and your body's saying, screaming at your thyroid, make more thyroid hormone, all of a sudden you get all this substrate, it just goes boom and makes a big shock of it. That's a potentiality. So I just be careful with any supplement. Always check, do you actually need the supplement? If you do, great. Bring yourself up into physiological levels and don't put yourself into super physiological levels. That goes for everything, really. And that's what I would do.
The next one, again, another sort of combined questions from folks here, but they tie into one another. So I'll sort of pair them together for us as we move along here. Is your thoughts on the gut microbiome, which I know on carnivore, and fermentation in the gut? And then tying into that, what do you recommend for folks that have malabsorption issues?
Well, that can tie in because if you have damage to your gut or your microbiome, that can affect things as well. But quite often you're getting absorption above the area where you have bacteria for quite a lot of it, and most of it. And so for the microbiome, what you eat, your microbiome eats, and what you eat supports your microbiome. So if you eat different things, your microbiome changes basically on a daily basis if you're eating different things. And so if you're eating what you're supposed to eat, you should be cultivating the bacteria that you're supposed to have, that you've sort of developed and evolved with this symbiotic sort of relationship where you have your oral biome, you have your microbiome in your gut. And so you're eating things and your oral biome is eating that. And so you're not cultivating the bacteria that are going to cause cavities by and large. And so this is why animals in the wild don't need to brush their teeth, and they don't need to go to their dentist to get their tartar scraped, and they don't get cavities and lose their teeth and all these sorts of things if they're eating what they're supposed to eat. And we look at pre-agricultural humans, and they had very, very strong, good, healthy teeth. After agriculture, exact opposite. And So that goes for your gut biome as well. So what you're eating is going to feed that. Now we live in an age of antibiotics everywhere. And some people will say that too. Like, well, maybe that's a benefit of eating plants like garlic. It's a natural antibiotic. And it's just like, okay, do you take antibiotics every day from the doctor? Like, well, no, God, you'd never do that. Then why are you eating garlic? And why are you eating it for its antibiotic properties? Like you're doing harm to yourself and your microbiome. And so we live in this day and age, and we take these medications and different sorts of substances that can drastically affect or damage or kill or destroy our microbiome. And so sometimes you need to replenish that, and that's where fermented foods come in. So there are traditional populations that have fermented foods in order to lower the toxicity burden and increase the bioavailability of different nutrients in plants, and other sorts of processes to do the same. And fermentation, if you keep it with the live sort of bacteria, that can be useful for your gut biome. And what you do with that is you chew that with meat, and you chew it up, and then you swallow it together as a whole, and that can sort of hide some of these bacteria so it doesn't get blasted by your stomach acids and digestive enzymes. And so it can actually get down to the area where you actually have bacteria, because if you're just eating it straight, most of it's not going to make it, if any of it makes it. And so, but you can do that with like live culture yogurt, or, just fermented milk, or even fermented meat. That's a traditional way of eating meat sometimes as well. I don't necessarily want to do that myself, but it is something that's done. I know in northern Alaska, there's a traditional way of like burying fish heads in jars and just letting them rot for like 6 months, and they get them out and just eat them. And like, you either love these things or hate these things. Like, it's like Marmite, or Vegemite. It's just like, you either really into it or just like, get it the hell away from me. And I saw this one thing with this these Native Alaskan couple. They were older, and the husband hated these things and the wife loved them. And so she had stashes of jars like all around the property, and like every time we'd find them, we'd smash them and throw them away. And because he just hated it, it smelled so gross. But every now and then she'd like sneak one through that he didn't find, and she'd just like eat these fish heads, and he would kick her out for a week and be like, you go stay with your sister, you're not staying in here, it just stinks too bad. It's just like smelled too bad. So, but you know what, her gut microbiome is probably super healthy. We know from studies with the Inuit, who don't really eat a lot of fermented food unless there's maybe some meat that's gone off, that they have some of the healthiest microbiomes ever measured. And that makes perfect sense. They're eating what they're designed to eat. And so the microbiome is the way it's designed to be, right? And so we can get that too, just by eating a proper diet. Now, if you're behind the 8 ball a bit, and you've been taking antibiotics and all these other sorts of things, and maybe you haven't cultivated the right microbiome, fermented foods, I would still stick with fermented animal products, is a good idea. There are some people that use fermented plants, like Dr. Sean O'Mara, and that's the only plant that he'll ever eat, is this fermented plant, and a small bit of it chewed up with meat swallows. You're not eating large amounts of these things, just a little bit, and that's helping his microbiome. And he does that with his patients as well. And it's actually interesting. He submitted a stool sample for a microbiome test with the company. And like the president or CEO of this company personally called him and said, hey, Dr. O'Mara, I'd really like to talk to you and see what you're doing, because you have the healthiest microbiome we have ever tested. And we want to know what the hell you're doing. And so he's like, yeah, no problem. So that's a great proof of concept. That shows that he's doing something right. That shows that he is doing it right. He's eating what we're designed to eat, and he's getting those healthy bacteria in there, and he's perpetuating them, propagating them by the way he's eating. So if you have a healthy microbiome, what you eat, it's going to eat. And so eating meat supports the optimal microbiome from other people's studies, from showing, from that company Dr. O'Mara went to, and from the studies with the Inuits, right? They are saying these are optimal microbiomes. Well, you support them by eating meat. Now, you need to get the bacteria in there in the first place, But then it's really, if you're eating the wrong thing and they don't thrive on those things and other bacteria thrives on those things, well, then other bacteria are going to shift and those ones are going to die out and you're going to get other bacteria. So, you need to eat the meat. Getting it there in the first place, maybe have some fermented. I think you can do just fine with, the lactobacillus sort of bacteria in yogurt and things like that. That's the only thing I've ever done is have a bit of that in that same way that Dr. O'Mara suggests. But I mean, I don't do it as a matter of course. It's just every now and then I'll have like a bit of yogurt and I'll chew it up with meat and swallow it. I probably don't need to at this point, but if you're having problems, or if you're taking antibiotics, or if you're coming from a different way of eating and you're early on, having some of that fermented live culture yogurt chewed up with meat in the same bite, swallowed together, that's probably a good idea. And then, but when you're off and running, I think you'll be fine. As to malabsorption issues, there are a lot of different causes of malabsorption. Like you say, not having adequately low stomach pH, or not having sort of a low grade pancreatic insufficiency or high grade pancreatic insufficiency. You may need to take medications to help you with that. Now, maybe your body will recover and help. And then the diet will help your body recover. But some people need to be on this stuff lifelong. We don't have every example of people on carnivore do this, but I have absolutely seen people like yourself not need this stuff long term, that they need it in the beginning and they don't need it after that. And so it depends. Older people will just have more difficulty absorbing nutrients anyway. And so that's just something you have to know about. And so that's another reason why a carnivore diet is such a good idea for everyone, is because this is the most bioavailable stuff out there. So it's the most healthy, most plentiful source of nutrition. And it's the most bioavailable. It's the easiest for us to digest, break down, and absorb. And so that's obviously what you want to be eating. Now, so if you have someone who, they're eating perfectly and everything, but they're just not quite getting enough, that's when you start adding in liver and organs and things like that. They're even more nutrient dense. And so people that have a bit of difficulty absorbing that, now you're just upping that load. And so, the smaller percentage that you can absorb now gives you a better yield.
Completely agree, Dr. Chaffee. And just as a quick aside, I'll let folks know that haven't heard it. My own journey was I wrecked my gut with years of antibiotic misuse and overprescribing, as we know happens. And also my high oxalate vegan diet, I had leaky gut. I was a poster child for it, to the point where when I first started the carnivore diet, I was reacting to everything. I had histamine reactions. I had reactions to almost anything I put in there. So it took for me to go pretty strict early on with no dairy, because I was reacting to dairy and anything fermented. And I went pretty strict for a while, and I slowly began to add the fermented, especially kefir, which I still use in the mornings to this day, a nice fermented kefir. I started, but I tell folks, with literally a shot glass and was sipping it, and that was it. And as my body and my gut healed thanks to the carnivore diet and low oxalate diet, I'm able to tolerate pretty much anything now. So that's a great advice. So the next question we have is specifically as it relates to the diet and helping with women's hormones like estrogen dominance. Your thoughts on that?
Just in general, again, so just general principles, if you're eating what you're designed to eat, your body's going to work the way it's designed to work. And that doesn't mean that you're going to go back to, youthful teenage levels of hormones, but you can actually improve quite dramatically. So women are going to optimize their estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone levels by going on a carnivore diet. There's a number of reasons for that. One is there are a lot of hormone disruptors in plants. This is one of the ways that they defend themselves, by mucking with animals' hormones so that they don't feel well, so that they can't reproduce, and then they can't make more pesky little animals that go eat that plant and its babies. And so a lot of plants have hormonal mimickers, right? And so, or disruptors, ones that just screw things up. So insulin is actually sort of in that category. Obviously, we need insulin. It's very important. But once it gets too high, that can start causing massive ramifications throughout our body. Basically, every hormone is going to affect other hormones down the chain, either directly or indirectly down the line. So they're all interlinked. And so you start getting these things out of balance and everything else becomes out of balance. So insulin is a hormone, and it becomes out of balance, it gets too high, then it disrupts other things. So in women in particular, high insulin levels can actually trigger the production of more testosterone. It also blocks the conversion of testosterone into estrogen, because women make testosterone first. First of all, it starts from cholesterol. There's multiple steps in the chain, a lot of intermediaries that are all hormones, that are all important, that are all necessary, have their own jobs. And then down the track, they eventually get into testosterone, and insulin boosts that, says more testosterone, please. But then testosterone gets converted into estrogen, both in men and women. Obviously, women need more than men, but men still need some. In women, at least, it blocks the conversion of testosterone into estrogen. And so that gives them too much testosterone, not enough estrogen. And you can get, obviously, infertility issues, disruption of your cycle, and PCOS, so polycystic ovarian syndrome. That's a leading cause of polycystic ovarian syndrome, if not the main cause or the cause. And, you very simply talk to a fertility specialist like Dr. Kiltz or non-carnivore. I mean, just go to your neighborhood fertility doctor and ask them, if I'm trying to get pregnant, I have PCOS, what do I do? Oh, you take metformin. That lowers insulin and insulin resistance, and then all of a sudden, bang, you don't have that problem anymore, and you're able to have kids. PCOS is the leading cause of female-driven infertility in the Western world, certainly in America, and it just comes from having insulin that's too high and insulin resistance. So it's, and that's the funny thing, you just stop eating carbohydrates. It also goes away. You also stop having PCOS, right? And so, I mean, that's been shown again and again in the literature. And so those are two major functions of disruption in female hormones and fertility. One other main one with insulin is that it also disrupts growth hormone. Growth hormone is a very important hormone. If you don't have enough, you can get dwarfism or progeria. That's a horrible illness where people just age dramatically quickly and die of old age at 12 or 13, right? That's from they have no growth hormone, right? So like dwarfism is like they don't have enough. Progeria is they have none. And so that causes them, A, to not grow, but B, to age ultra fast. And there are other problems as well that's going on. It's not just the growth hormone, but that's a major component of it. They don't have really any growth hormone. And so they age dramatically quickly. So what does that mean? We all basically have the same syndrome phenomenon as people with progeria. It's just called aging. It's just going slower in all of us. Okay. And a major component of that is growth hormone. So progeria, there's no growth hormone, age very quickly. Well, as we age, our growth hormone goes down, or when we're eating certain things or doing certain things, our growth hormone can be suppressed. If you don't sleep properly, your growth hormone is suppressed, because we secrete growth hormone every 60 minutes in men, every 90 minutes in women, but maximally about 2 hours after you go to sleep, and then throughout the night and when you wake up, right before you wake up. So if you go to bed late or wake up before your body wants to, you're not going to get those big hits of growth hormone that your body wants, right? If you have all these lights around you all the time, you're not going to be able to pump out the melatonin that you need, because melatonin only works in the dark. When you have light on you all the time, your melatonin just goes away. There's something Andrew Huberman said in a podcast of his, but he said that if you just go to the bathroom in the middle of the night and just turn on the bathroom lights to go pee, that's enough light to wipe out all of the melatonin in your brain. Melatonin is one of your brain's most important and most powerful antioxidants. That's cleaning up all the free radicals and mess that you've made during the day. It's very important. Also, is again a hormone. This triggers other hormones, and it's involved in growth hormone production. It can actually stimulate growth hormone production. So if you have adequate melatonin levels, or you're taking exogenous melatonin, that can actually increase your growth hormone production by 75% if taken correctly with the dark and sleeping properly and all of that. So a major problem comes, and this is what I think is probably the major issue with eating before you go to sleep on a traditional diet, is carbohydrates, obviously raise insulin, and insulin not only blocks the secretion of growth hormone from the pituitary, so you don't produce as much growth hormone, but it also blocks the action of growth hormone, right? So you're producing less and it's less active. So you get a really, really big hit to your growth hormone action in your body. And that can be relayed on blood tests through IGF-1, so insulin-like growth factor 1, which people, oh my God, it grows, it makes cancer grow, it makes you grow, it makes your body grow. And you have this balance of anabolism and catabolism, right? Where you're growing and breaking down, right? When you're a kid and you're growing up, you're just growing. So you're in this anabolic state and you're just growing bigger. Then you get to a place where that sort of slows down and you're not growing as much. And then you get to a balance point where your growth and breakdown equal each other. And that stays for a period of years. You want to extend that for as many years as possible with healthy lifestyle. Eventually, the catabolism overwhelms the anabolism and you start breaking down. And this is where, people start shrinking. Their shoulders actually shrink. That's actually a sign of lower growth hormones. So you see like men who have had big, broad shoulders, big, strong, healthy, strapping men, and then they get to be old men and they get little trout shoulders. That's from low growth hormone, and they're physically shrinking. Their bodies are physically breaking down and catabolizing, and they get sarcopenia, and their muscles wear out, and their bones start to decay, and their brain starts to decay. All these sorts of things, and a lot of them can be from growth hormones. So you're eating carbohydrates. You're accelerating that process. You're blocking growth hormone production. You're blocking growth hormone action. You're eating throughout the day. Again, you're making this stuff every 60 minutes if you're in a man, every 90 minutes in a woman, or females and boys, and girls and boys. And so you're really hurting yourself. As you're a kid and you're in that anabolic state, you want your growth hormone. You want your hormones being normal so that you can grow properly. You can grow as tall and strong and broad and as intelligent as you're supposed to be. And that's what you live on for the rest of your life. And so if you're eating a lot of carbs during development or in adulthood, you're really, really impeding that. And so that's a big, big negative of eating carbohydrates as well. And another sign that we're not supposed to do it. You want to eat what you're designed to eat, and your body's going to work the way it's designed to work.
I will just throw in James's anecdotal evidence here as a high carb, low fat vegan. No matter how much I was exercising, Dr. Chaffee, I was not putting on the muscle that I have since becoming carnivore, mostly animal based. And my hormones went off a cliff. My libido left me, and it's come raging back at 51 since I switched over to adding animal products back in my diet and good old animal fats. And I calculated on a podcast just this past week. And for those listeners, I just turned 51 this past week. I feel great. I also have put on 50 pounds of muscle since being a vegan.
Nice. Jesus. Nice.
In the last 3 years, I've put on 50 pounds, Dr. Chaffee. At my lowest and my sickest, I was 127. I'm now 180 something. And like the shoulders, as you just alluded to, broad again. I mean, there's hard work involved in there. I exercise and I'm tossing some weight around in the gym, but that's because I can now. I have the energy to, and my body's going, hey, this is great. So it's just proof at any age that you can do it. Dr. Chaffee, that ties in very quickly to another question. How does weight loss impact insulin?
I mean, it depends on how you lose your weight, but weight loss can help in a number of ways. But you can lose weight and do it the wrong way and still maintain high insulin levels. So that's not necessarily directly related or correlated. If you lose weight, it can help other things. I mean, even just losing weight, and certainly losing weight in a way that lowers your insulin as well, that will dramatically improve your growth hormone, testosterone, estrogen, and all the thyroid hormone and everything like that as well. We have a clinic, functional medicine clinic here. We deal with people that are overweight and they're going through somatopause, which is sort of like menopause, but for somatotropin, which is your growth hormone, right? And so it's basically you stop producing this stuff and you're starting to age quicker and you're putting on fat and doing all these sorts of things. We get people to exercise, we get people to sprint and to lift weights and actually just stretch. There are some studies showing that just stretching can stimulate IGF-1. And so we get them to do that. We change their diet. We get them to eat better and eat properly. They start losing the weight. And just by doing that, we have people doubling their IGF-1 from really, low bad levels, catabolic levels, where their body is breaking down, it's not able to support and maintain itself, up to closer to that even window where you're not breaking down or building up, right? You go too much, it's a bad thing. You go too little, it's a bad thing. So you want to be right there. You want to be just square. You just want to stay the same. And then that's what you need to sort of strive for. So we get people, when they lose the weight, we actually see these hormones improve as well. Another important thing about hormones in general, not just insulin in particular, is that your adipose tissue is actually your largest endocrine tissue. So an endocrine organ is an organ that produces hormones. And so we don't think of fat as an endocrine organ. I certainly wasn't taught that fat was an endocrine organ in medical school, but it is. It's our largest endocrine organ, and it produces estrogen. And so if you're very overweight and you have a lot of excess body fat, you're producing a lot of estrogen. And so if you're a man, you're going to get man boobs. If you're a woman, you can get deranged and disordered hormones there as well. And then you get into the visceral fat, which is Dr. Sean O'Mara's specialty. He did a study with the National Institute of Science with over 6,000 people, MRIs of their abdomen to look for visceral fat, and found that even in people that are skinny, they could have a lot of visceral fat, and they're actually metabolically sick. And this is where the term TOFI comes from, TOFI, so thin outside, fat inside. And these people look very slim. They may run marathons and do triathlons and Ironman competitions and things like that and do very well, but they're actually metabolically sick, or they're going in that direction. And so he found that just addressing the visceral fat and doing things to reverse the visceral fat and get rid of the visceral fat, that this actually reversed the metabolic issues in everyone that they looked at, right? And so that's because visceral fat is not normal fat. It's actually metabolically active, and it's metabolically damaging. It actually increases your risk of cancer and actually increases your risk of dying from cancer. And why is that? Well, we've noticed that, I haven't noticed. People have noticed that your main cellular defense against cancer are called your natural killer T cells, your NKT cells. And so these are just roaming around your body looking for random things. They're just part of your innate immunity. And but they're also looking for cancer cells. They're looking for your cells that are going rogue and just saying, hey, that one's not working right. Zap it. Right. And so it's trying to do that. And so it's your main line against developing cancer and also fighting cancer if you have it. And they've noticed that people that are more overweight, particularly had more visceral fat, had lower levels of serum NKT cells. I'm like, oh, that's weird. We don't know why, but it was very strongly related. And so it was like this inverse relationship. The more visceral fat, the lower NKT cells. Well, Trinity College in Dublin found just this past year, maybe the year before, that the reason why that is that visceral fat, not other fat, just visceral fat, have receptors that bind and lock in and pull in NKT cells. And so they actually sequester and lock these suckers down. And so just by losing that visceral fat, you're releasing all of these NKT cells back out in the mix to go do their thing. And you're also reversing a lot of these metabolic issues as well. So that's a major thing. And that was a very interesting thing that Dr. O'Mara found, is that now he prescribes like high intensity exercise. So like sprinting and weightlifting, which is what I've advocated and what my clinic has advocated for a very long time. We see that it works and that it helps people. And so he found that was the case, which is great. So he gets people sprinting, he gets people lifting weights, right? And maximal short duration of maximal intensity, right? 3 days a week. And you just push yourself, whatever that means for you. You just work as hard as you can and move on. And a carnivore diet. He said the carnivore diet was the best diet to remove visceral fat. And so that can help dramatically as well, and not only improve your hormones, but improve your metabolism. And obviously your insulin is tightly wound up in your metabolic state. And so the things that you can do to reverse your visceral fat, reverse your metabolic issues, and fix your hormonal issues will also lower your insulin down as well back to normal levels. So that's not causing a problem too.
I'd like to get Dr. Amara on the podcast as well eventually.
Yeah.
Really interesting guy to talk to about the visceral fat side of things. This one and these ones are a little bit broader, so I saved them to the end. And there's one in particular I'm saving to the very final question, which you'll understand why. But this one is the protein to fat ratio on the carnivore diet. What's the ideal, or is there one, or does it depend on the person and their goals?
No, well, not the person and their goals, but certainly the person. So people have different demands. And so, I mean, I don't think that you're going to micromanage and outthink your biochemistry. You're just not. People have been trying it for years, and that has got us into the world of hurt that we are in right now. Your body knows what it wants. Your body knows what it's doing, and your body will tell you and reward you if you're eating the right thing. It's going to taste good. Sugar also tastes good, but sugar is an outlier. Sugar is a drug. Sugar is addictive. So that tastes good for another reason. It also tastes good because we recognize it as safe. This is something that we say, okay, this is not going to kill me right now, because we don't know of any plants that contain fructose in particular that will kill us that day. Now, they still have toxins. They still have like furanocoumarins and citrus, for example, but they're not going to kill you. They give you a quick hit of energy and you can survive. And so we recognize that as safe. That's an outlier. If you're talking about meat, if it tastes good, your body's saying, hey, this tastes good for a reason. You keep eating until it stops tasting good, right? So if you're eating and just like, lean meat tastes really good to you and you really want that, and you taste sort of fatty and like, not really liking that, okay, fine, just eat that. Most people really like the fat, and you want to eat that just, as well. So and some people, you'll eat leaner ground beef, say, it'll get pretty boring pretty quickly. And then you add some fat in there, like, actually, that's interesting again. That tastes great. So it matters for the individual. It matters for where you're at. If you're working out a lot, you're probably going to need more protein, but you're also going to need more fat. Actually, fat, again, is an essential nutrient. And so you're going to just want to hit your body's demands. So what I shoot for and what I recommend for people is between 1 to 2 grams of fat per 1 gram of protein. And so that sort of shakes out to be 70 to 80% calories from fat. That's about what you see animals in the wild get, both carnivores and herbivores, because fat and protein is what make the animal kingdom go round. So carnivores, because they're eating animals with fat, and they go for the fat first, and they really go after the fat. So if you people out in the wild and they're alone, that sort of show that the people out there scared and alone or whatever, they're surviving out in the wild. They're generally they'll store fat, and they have these jars of fat, and they're like, this is really important. The fat is really important, and I need this to survive. Then like this Wolverine broke in and just went after his food stores, but only ate the fat, just ate out all the fat that was there, because that's what animals want. And then he went and killed the Wolverine and ate it, and so he got his fat back. But it's that's what's important is both the fat and the meat. So also herbivores, because they may eat grass, they may eat leaves, they may eat fiber, but what they absorb is fat and protein, because they don't break down fiber. No vertebrate animal can break down fiber. So it's actually the bacteria that eat the fiber, and they secrete short chain fatty acids, which are 100% saturated, and they die off, and that breaks down and gets absorbed as protein. And so gorillas that just eat green leaves, people talk about, oh, look how strong a gorilla is. They definitely get enough protein. It's not from the plant. It's from the bacteria die off in their gut, and they get fat and protein. They're not getting carbs. They're not absorbing that plant. It's not really easy to turn plant tissue into animal tissue, and they don't do it. The bacteria in their guts do it. And so that's what they're absorbing, fat and protein. And then cows get, upwards of 80%, so they're getting about 2 grams of fat, and they're getting protein as well. So that is what I try to mimic as well. And so you aim for that, aim for 1 gram or 2 of fat per gram of protein, and adjust for your own person. There are ways of telling how much you need, mostly by taste, but also by your stools. If you're getting loose stools, you're not drinking coffee or using artificial sweeteners, and you don't have any other sort of digestive issue, then it could be that you're eating far too much fat than your body can absorb, because your body has limited capacity to absorb fat. After that, it just goes out. And so there's a lot coming out, it's going to come out dramatically. And if you're not getting enough fat, you're going to get constipated because your stools are going to be very dry and hard because it's no fat's getting out. So you want to get like that Goldilocks spot where you're eating a little more fat than your body can absorb. So that means that your body's getting all the fat that it needs and a little bit extra, and that's just going into the stool and that's keeping it soft. So if you have soft stools and you're not taking any sort of mild laxatives like coffee or tea or artificial sweeteners, all of which are laxatives, then you just check that. And so if it's nice and soft, then you're all right, and you just adjust from there, and just eat until things stop tasting good. I don't think that you have to, micromanage anything further than that.
Three more, Dr. Chaffee. This is an important one as it relates to the carnivore diet, and often folks have questions about it. It is, can you give us your opinion about gout and purines related to kidney function as you go into the carnivore diet? There's always a concern there, I think, with gout and making it worse, exacerbating.
Yeah, well, I mean, those are sort of two different topics, the kidney function and the gout. But we've been treating gout with a red meat and water diet since the 1800s. And so you go on a red meat and water diet, and you might have one or two sort of flare-ups after that, and then it just goes away and it's done after that. There are other things that cause gout too. There was something like up to 5 different causes of gout. That's not just, the uric acid. As far as, the late 90s anyway, or 2000, then maybe, when I was going through, it was gout and pseudo gout. So maybe they just reclassified things and put those 4 other things into pseudo gout category, and just basically, whatever. It's not real gout, but what is pseudo gout? I mean, it feels exactly the same. And one of those is oxalates. Oxalates is a cause of gout or pseudo gout. Maybe they're calling it that now. And so they're all different sorts of causes of gout. And it is also the case that people can get gout and not have high uric acid and in their serum, and then allopurinol and things like that don't necessarily help. And so is it 1-to-1? I don't know. I think it's probably more going on there than we necessarily know about. But what we do know is we've been treating people with gout since the 1800s with just a beef and water diet. Look up Dr. J.H. Salisbury. That's where the Salisbury steak is. That was to treat rheumatoid arthritis, tuberculosis, Crohn's, gout, and other chronic Lyme, things like that. He noticed that you could actually fix people by getting them on their natural diet. And he did a 30-year research project into the optimal nutrition for human beings. And he wrote the book on it. It's called The Relation of Alimentation and Disease. It's all about, what you eat causes these diseases. You stop eating those things, those diseases go away. It's exactly the book I'm writing right now, and it's true. It's bloody true. And it's worse now because people didn't listen. Well, they listened to him at the time, which we just papered over it with all these studies that showed that, no, you should definitely do the opposite, even though it's making you sick. And so that bugs the hell out of me. But if you go on a carnivore diet, it's not red meat that causes gout. It's the sugar and the alcohol and things like that. And so fructose in particular, alcohol in particular, you get rid of those things and your gout will go away. Now you might have some teething issues and you might have a couple little blips. It will go away. Just keep eating meat, take medication if you have to, but you'll be fine. You'll get through it and it will go away. As to kidney function, a lot of people worry about, more protein. Does this damage your kidneys? No, it does not. That was an assumption that people made. And like most things in medicine, it was just the best we could do at the time. And it was just like, well, this fits physiologically. We think this makes sense. You eat more protein, it makes more urea, and that has to be secreted from, forced out by your kidney, and that may be hard for your kidney, and therefore that's going to be hard on your kidney and make it worse. No, that's not actually what happened. When people actually did studies and actually looked at it and say, okay, what happens when you have higher protein? They went, wow, look at that, kidney function goes up. So that's good. So more protein actually leads to better kidney function, not worse kidney function. And I've seen people with serious kidney failure and kidney issues, so chronic kidney disease, stage 4, so very low kidney function, actually improve and get back up to fairly normal levels, if not normal levels. And I've seen 3 people It's anecdotal, but I've seen 3 people so far be able to cut. Now, this is them reporting it. I'm just talking to them. This wasn't my patient, but they said that they had come off dialysis and it had taken like 9 months to a year, but they came off dialysis, which is not supposed to happen. But presumably they had enough life left in their kidney that taking away all these nephrotoxic things like oxalates and all these other plant toxins that are really hard on your kidneys and giving your body what it actually needs, actually wants fat and protein from animals, that it was able to recover to a certain extent. Not everyone's going to be able to do that. Not everyone's going to have anything to claw back from if they're completely gone. And one gentleman I'm working with now, he's on dialysis. He was vegan for a number of years and did all the perfect things and was on the commune and all that sort of stuff. And he was getting more and more sick, losing more and more weight. And I mean, he almost died. He was almost like that poor, vegan lady that went frugivore and ended up dying, likely as a result of that. We don't necessarily know exactly what she died from, but it's probably that. And, and also, I mean, she's so sickly that, just a stiff breeze or a common cold is going to go do serious harm to her. And so maybe that happened as well. But he was very sick and he was still just in his, oh, this is perfect. I'm doing the healthiest thing. I'm just so healthy. Everything's so great. Everything's so wonderful. And he was actually getting neurological damage and dysfunction and actually couldn't really walk. He was sort of bedridden and just sort of stuck in bed. And he was still like, oh, I'll get through it because I'm vegan, I'm healthy and all that sort of stuff. And then all of a sudden when he realized like, oh, Jesus, no, I'm dying. Like this is a problem, is when he was using his phone and his thumb wouldn't work and his hands were so neurologically dysfunctional that he couldn't even use his phone. And so he's like, okay, no, this is a problem. And this is because I'm eating shit. And I'm, but he's not eating shit. He was eating a whole food vegan diet, which is shit, And so he was just like, okay, I'm eating the wrong thing and I've got to change this. I've got to change my life. I've got to start eating meat again. Thank God he's recovering, but he destroyed his kidneys. So now he's on dialysis. And he is, he's a young guy. He's like, his early 30s and very well meaning. Like, I mean, this is not like a mean person that like, was doing bad things to people. He was trying to do the right thing. And he just had really bad advice from really bad people who are pumping this stuff out for their own benefit and gain, which is really sick. And there are obviously well-meaning people that are advocating this as well, but because they've been taken in as well. But the people at the top, the people pushing this agenda, they know what they're doing. And so that's who I'm talking about there. But thankfully, he's recovering. He's recovering his neurological function, and he's actually making more urine now. He's still on dialysis, but he still makes a bit of urine. Now he's making more urine and more urine and more urine. So fingers crossed he can come off his dialysis as well, which would be amazing. But that's not supposed to happen. And that's not going to happen if meat is bad for you, if more protein is bad for you, your kidneys. It's just not. It's going to go the other way. You're going to have someone with CKD4 go slam into dialysis, and people having normal kidney function start getting CKD. That's what's going to happen. And you're definitely not going to see people reversing major kidney issues like that. But that is actually what we're seeing. And that's already in the literature. It's just, a lot of doctors don't know that. This is just something that is bandied around and they just repeat it and they don't realize that it's wrong. And that was the thing. It was a very famous quote from a Harvard graduating medical class in 40s or something like that, maybe 30s. And they said, just so you guys know, half of what you learned here in Harvard is wrong, but no one's ever going to tell you which half is wrong. You're going to have to figure that out. You're going to have to stay current. You're going to have to read the studies. You're going to have to figure out what's wrong. And the studies that you go on forward, a lot of those are going to be wrong. And you got to keep track of those and see which ones you think hold water. And then you try it yourself and be like, this isn't actually working the way they're saying it's working. I don't think that it's right. And then years down the road, it might be the case. There was just as a last little anecdote, there was the director of Lancet or whatever his position was. Anyway, he was in charge of the Lancet, which is one of the top medical journals in the world and has been forever. And, okay, so for the fact checkers, not technically forever, but a very long time. And so he said that there are so many different reasons why most of the studies, even in the Lancet or the New England Journal of Medicine or JAMA or BMJ or Science and all these other things, are complete bullshit. Some of them are just straight up bullshit. Some of them, they have lied, and they've misled, and they've fudged numbers, just like the Alzheimer's studies that previously said that, oh, look, beta amyloid plaque, this causes Alzheimer's, right? And so now everyone's spending billions of dollars trying to figure out drugs that will get rid of beta amyloid plaques. And nothing was working. Nothing was helping. And then it turns out, oh, look at that. They lied, and they doctored their data, and they made it look like it was beta amyloid, and it had nothing to do with beta amyloid as a cause. That was just something happening in the background, but that wasn't the causative factor. And they knowingly lied. They knowingly fudged their numbers and their data, and that came out last year. So you don't know. And then other things, people have agendas. People like the Seventh-day Adventists and Kellogg's and Nestle and Coca-Cola, they pump out far more research in nutritional medicine and nutritional science and nutritional medicine than any other institution. You know, the Coca-Cola alone, just Coca-Cola, not even the other major conglomerates, they spend 11 times the amount of money on nutritional research than the NIH, the National Institutes of Health. So the vast majority of studies and money are coming from exactly the wrong people. And so these things are going to be biased. They're going to be crap. They're going to be garbage. They're going to be junk science. They're going to be junk studies, because they are designed to pitch a narrative, to sell a product. It's not designed to actually show the truth and show what's actually happening. So it's, oh, well, you're just a science denier. Oh, look at this. I don't give a rat's ass about the study. You can have all the studies you want that show me that Coca-Cola makes rats lose weight. I don't give a shit. Like, it doesn't mean that Coca-Cola is good for you or that sugar is good for you and helps with weight loss. No thanks. You know, and in fact, they didn't just use just sugar and cane sugar. They, oh, we'll just give them Coca-Cola. We have cane sugar and Coca-Cola. Just give them Coca-Cola. Look, they're losing weight. They're doing better. I bet they are in your study. That doesn't mean it actually happens in real life. And so, you know, it doesn't matter how brilliant your theory is, and it doesn't matter how smart you are. If it doesn't agree with reality, it's wrong. And so when you have a biological principle and law of adaptation and biological design, where you have an animal that's been eating the same thing for millions of years, it is adapted to that food. It is now biologically appropriate to eat that food. It is now biologically optimized by eating that food, because it has developed with that food, like we have with meat, like koalas have with eucalyptus, like cows have with certain grasses. And then you say, well, here's this study that shows actually cows should be eating apples and Dairy Queen, frozen yogurts. That's what this shows. I don't care. I don't care what your stupid study says. That doesn't line up with biological reality and the biological laws. They are biologically designed to eat that grass because they've been eating it for millions and millions and millions and millions of years, right? So that through biological adaptation, that is going to be their ideal food. Just like meat is going to be our ideal food because we have had millions of years to adapt to it. Not that you need to. There's nothing in meat that's harmful that you have to adapt to and to build defenses for. There are in plants. You have to be adapted to eating plants. You have to. We've only had 10,000 years to adapt to eating some plants. And now we're adding in all these plants that didn't exist even 10,000 years ago. And when we're giving this to Native Americans, Native Australians, Sub-Saharan Africans, and other people who have not had 10,000 years exposure and adaptation to these nasty ass foods and chemical poison plants that are plants, and we're saying that they've never adapted to these things. They've never had them introduced until very recently, but that's definitely optimal for them. Why the hell would that be? That makes no damn sense. Something that we've never eaten and are not biologically adapted to and designed for, that's optimal for us. I mean, like, really, like that's actually that's not looking at what is in front of you. That's not observing the world around you, and that's just denying reality. So yeah, tons of studies that say a lot of nonsense that that really aren't worth the paper that they're written on. If they don't agree with biological fundamental laws, they're wrong. And that's how I feel about these other nutritional studies that are bought and paid for by these multinational, multi-trillion-dollar companies. And and they're just trying to push a product. And that was what the director of the Lancet said. You have all these ulterior motives. You've got really shady dealings. You've got a lot of money changing hands. And so most of the studies coming out are garbage. And no one's going to tell you which ones they are. But he was saying it's a really sad state for science because it's not what it's supposed to be. We're supposed to be trying to further human knowledge and learning and understanding and further the human race. And we are absolutely torpedoing ourselves. We're going backwards. We are regressing dramatically. We're in a terrible time right now for that. And instead of, because there were so many people for so long that actually were very altruistic, and they were like, how do we cure diseases? How do we help people? How do we save things? They had these really strong fundamental, sort of principles and values, valuing human life and experience, and saying, okay, how do we help people? How do we make this a better place for other people to live in? And now it's, how do I make a profit? How do I make a buck? Now, that's fine if you want to make a profit, but we just want the profit model to reward people that are doing nice things for people. And a lot of times that does in the free market. But when you have corruption of these government entities and these guidelines that are saying that you're paying these people off to say, hey, why don't you go around telling people that my product's really good for people? Well, of course they're motivated to do that, right? But that's why you don't let them do that, right? And so if they're not doing that, and you actually have these scientific bodies intact and they're not corrupted and they're not being bribed and paid off, then you say, no, that's crap. You should be eating meat. You shouldn't be eating this stuff or whatever. And then the market moves and it shifts because people, I don't want to buy that. I'm going to buy what's healthy for me. I want to be healthy. And so you're going to get products that are more healthy. So now we've corrupted that. That's not a product of the free market. That's a product of, cronyism and corruption and buying off politicians and scientists and researchers and buying all these studies. I don't know how scientists work for these people. I mean, that's pretty awful, that you're designing studies that are misleading to people. And that's the majority of these studies, right? And so, and the thing is too, is that they may hire real people to do the study, but the study doesn't show what they wanted to show. They just bury it. They never publish it in the first place. So, and they can, because it's privately run, but that's a big problem as well. So sorry, I went on a bit of a tangent or three, but hopefully that was useful to someone besides just me ranting.
Love it. And when you start to really unravel this twisted web of deceit that's out there, man, it can be depressing a little bit. And as an ex-vegan, for me, like, I was just like, man, what else have I been hoodwinked on? And thank God I have the mental clarity and acuity now to decipher all the garbage that's out there. So thank you again for all your advocacy in this area. Dr. Chaffee, final question. And it's one that I wanted to preface by saying that, and let me read the question first. What can you say to a vegetarian or vegan to help them add animal products back into their diet? And I'll preface this by saying that I get a ton of questions on this, specifically because I'm out there in this public space now telling people about my journey from pescatarianism, vegetarianism to veganism strict for 6 years, how my health went off a cliff and how adding animal products in the carnivore diet saved my life. Literally, you were just talking about that. And I often direct them to an episode, which before we even spoke for the first time face-to-face on my first podcast, we appeared on together, unbeknownst to the both of us. That was put together by a dear friend, a mutual friend of ours, Casey Ruff from Boundless Body Radio. He put together a long-form podcast called Ex-Vegans Returning from Malnutrition. You're on there. I'm on there. Lear Keith's on there. Jane Buxton's on there. So it's about 4 hours long. But I direct people to that episode and just tell them to, if they're willing to listen to it, and the doors cracked that open bit, that I can tell them that it's very impactful. But what would you say, Dr. Chaffee? Now, I mean, I we already know what you're putting out there in the space in terms of that. But specifically for those who have family members or friends that are just dogmatically, we just talked about it, sticking to that way of eating.
Well, it's really important on why they're choosing to be vegan or vegetarian, because people have so many different reasons for choosing that lifestyle, and it's important to address those things, because I mean, you know, people aren't necessarily dumb. That's not why they're making decisions that we make, that we don't make. I mean, you're not a dumb guy, and you went down that path, and it was very convincing to you because there were very convincing people saying very convincing things. And so you went down that, and that did not work out very well. And then you came away from it, and now you're saying, wow, oh my God, I'm looking at things very differently. But a lot of people go down those paths because things are very convincing, because they think it's the most healthy way to live, even though it's devoid of specific nutrients that are essential. And how can that possibly be a good diet if it's devoid of essential nutrients? It makes no sense. Any nutritionist who tells you to eat a diet that is devoid of nutrients is a bad nutritionist. They should not be giving you advice, or anyone else for that matter. So then there are people, you know, thinking about, you know, worried about the climate and the, you know, ecosystem and all these sorts of things, and or could be just they don't want to hurt animals. They think that's a horrible idea. So that's what you have to sort of address, and you have to sort of address their actual concerns and say, okay, so what, you know, what's your major issue? Well, you know, I want to lose weight. I don't want to be fat, and I want to be healthy. I want to be as healthy as I can. And I saw this thing called the Game Changers, and it showed how healthy you were if you ate a bunch of plants. It's like, okay, well, you know, actually, you know, there's all these things you can address it from a nutritional standpoint. You know, basically, you know, we are carnivores. It's the kind of animal we are. That's how we're biologically designed. We've always eaten meat. You know, during the ice ages, there were no plants to eat. So obviously, if that wasn't optimal, we're not going to make it, because you can't eat through an ice age. You either thrive or you die. And we not only thrive, but we became the most dominant species that has ever existed during ice ages. So obviously, meat has a lot to say for it. Same with the Inuit and the Maasai and the Nanette and all these different, you know, the Native Americans in the 1800s. They just ate bison, and they were the tallest human beings on Earth. And now they are not, you know. And then you look at the fossil record of, you know, of losing 5 inches, 11% brain volume, and making your teeth and all these other sorts of, you know, abnormalities and worse developmental issues have them crop up. And you can show example after example after example, and you can get into all the issues with plant toxins and things like that. Well, if they're talking about the environment, then you have to address that. It's like, well, like, look, that's and the thing is that they're generally a mix of all three of those things, because they always get tied up together. And so when you're talking about nutrition, you have to stay on that point, because as soon as they start losing ground on one, they're going to switch tactics, and they're like, oh, I don't like this, and they switch to tangents. You have to pin them down. You have to keep them talking on one topic, or else you just keep switching, and no one goes anywhere. This is like trying to talk to people, you know, online like this. You know, they're just trying to be like slippery eels, and, you know, and that's a sign that, you know, someone's not being honest in a conversation as well. If they keep trying to slip away, and you keep saying, hey, no, we're talking about this, you're not addressing this, and they just don't do it, you know that they're not being honest. And so watching those interactions, that's how you recognize that, and you should call them out for that. And you see someone in a conversation doing that, and be like, hey, you're dodging the question, you know, stay on topic. You know, so you say, okay, look, those are all important issues. I agree with you, but we're just talking about nutrition right now. So, you know, because I'm just talking about what's optimal for us to eat, you know, that's what I'm talking about. I'm a doctor. This is what I care about. And so it's like, okay, so we talk about that, and they go, okay, look, I agree with you that, you know, eating meat is optimal. It's really not a good idea to eat plants. However, environmental impact is it's way bigger than us. Great. I'm glad you brought that up. So then you talk about that, and you actually point out that animals have been part of the environment forever. They are the environment. And so why are they causing a problem now when they've never caused a problem ever in history of the planet? Right. So, you know, and also pointing out that the emissions that come out from a herd of cattle is exactly the same emissions and the same amount of emissions as if that land was just natural and wild, and those were wild animals, right? Because they're just animals. There's nothing particular and peculiar about livestock that's any different from any other animal on Earth. So we're going to start wiping out the elephants and the dolphins and the fish and the this and that, and all the birds and everything. I mean, we're doing a pretty good job with all the plant agriculture and crop agriculture and the pesticides and insecticides and all these sorts of things. And fertilizers, all this stuff washing into our waterways and choking out streams and killing all sorts of animals. So, animals don't destroy the environment. Animals are the environment. And you can point all these things out, and you can point out that crop agriculture necessarily has to destroy an entire ecosystem just to grow one single plant. And then the vegans will say, well, you're destroying all these plants. True. Like Borneo, they've destroyed 55% of the rainforest, but then you just, planted more plants. Oh, hey, look, plants, same. No, it's not same. That's not an ecosystem. That's a specific crop, and that's not a diverse biosphere, right? This is a very, very, very alien form of growing crops, and it actually mines. It's sort of like data mining for the ground. It's just ripping out nutrients out of the ground, and those nutrients go away. And if you don't have animals and other insects and funguses and other plants in that area, in that environment, you don't get those nutrients back in the soil, right? And so you point these things out, and they go, okay, all right, well, but it's just unethical. You're killing all these animals, all these sorts of things. Sure. Well, let's define ethics. First of all, the Aristotelian definition of ethics was to live by one's nature. So what's ethical to a wolf is different from what's ethical to a giraffe or to a person. And so a wolf is supposed to hunt and eat and kill and do all that sort of stuff. That's what's ethical for a wolf. What's ethical for a human, he thought, was to reason and to think about things. Okay, well, let's think about it then. We are carnivores. We're apex predators. We're designed to eat meat. That's what we're supposed to do. That's what we should do for our health. Is it moral to deny proper nutrition to ourselves, to our children, so they don't develop properly, so they have stunted growth, stunted development of their brains and their teeth and their stature and their intelligence, and they're not as healthy and they're not as happy, and they're depressed and miserable, maybe have mental health issues or other physical issues? Or is it moral to withhold proper nutrition from an aging population so they develop dementia and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis and other sorts of autoimmune issues? Is that moral and ethical to force people to suffer, to cause millions of people, billions of people around the world to suffer for decades and then die 50, 60 years early? Because we're supposed to live 120 years genetically. Not everyone knows that. But I was taught that 23 years ago in my genetics class at university, in the University of Washington. And they spearheaded the Human Genome Project. Pretty good geneticists. And they said, according to our chromosomes, the length of our telomeres on our chromosomes, we are designed to live 120 years on average. So why are we dying in our 60s and 70s? So it's, oh, well, my grandma ate a lot of carrots and she lived to 90. Good. She died 30 years early. You're not winning any arguments there. If your grandma lived to 150 and ate a vegan diet, I might listen to you long enough to point out where you're lying. But, that's not, saying something, someone lived 80 years, 90 years, like that's still dying decades early. And they suffered a long time up until then. They probably had sarcopenia, a lot of surgeries, tons of medications. They were not healthy. They were not like Maggie, who's 82, jumping over fences to corral a raging bull. They're in a nursing home drooling at 84. And that's because they're eating the wrong thing. Is that moral? Is that moral to take away someone's independence and happiness in life and take them away from their family when they could be like Maggie, living a long, happy, beautiful life with great-grandchildren, helping raise great-grandchildren, and being, sipping gruel and drooling in a nursing home? Is that moral? Is that ethical? And then when you look at the simple fact that you have to kill, there's a study from University of New South Wales in 2011 that you have to kill 25 times more sentient animals, because that's what they care about, right? And they shift the goalposts, because they say don't eat honey because that comes from bees, and bees are exploited animals and that's not good. But you can eat the almonds, even though billions of bees die treating the almonds and things like that every single year. And yeah, you shouldn't eat honey, but yeah, killing quadrillions of insects with insecticides and pesticides and sprays on all our crops, totally fine. So they sort of go back and forth there too. So, well, we're talking sentient animals that can think, have a brain, like mammals and birds and lizards and snakes. and deer and elk and all these sorts of things. Fine. Well, you have to kill 25 times more sentient animals to grow 1 pound of plant-based protein than 1 pound of animal-based protein from large ruminant animals like a cow. And then some dishonest people will say, well, you actually have to kill more animals. Like if you're eating chickens, you have to kill 1.6 times as many chickens as you would to grow this to get the same calories. And now they say calories as opposed to protein because that shifts things as well. But they use chickens, right? I don't need chickens. I eat cows. There's 300, 400 chickens per cow or more, right? So I'm taking one life every year or two, depending on the size of a cow, where you're killing thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of sentient animals every year for your food, and it's destroying the environment. And there is killing, tens of millions of birds, nearly 100 million birds, making close to 1 billion birds sick. And those are the ones we can calculate because you have a quadrillion insects that are now dead. Now you don't have millions and millions and millions and millions of birds able to eat those bugs and have more birds. And that stuff gets in the waterways. It kills more fish. It kills more birds. It kills more animals. It kills all sorts of things. And it doesn't even just stop there. You have a crop and you have an animal coming in to eat your crop. They have snipers to shoot those animals to stop them from destroying the crops. And we talk about Borneo. Well, they replaced it with all. They ripped down 55% of Borneo's rainforest to build not cattle ranches, palm seed oil farms, right? So they're making a bunch of palm seed oil for all your vegan treats, right? And they killed all the animals. They killed all the orangutans. They're bulldozing trees. Orangutans are falling out, smashing, breaking, dying horribly, slowly over days sometimes. The snakes, the birds, the monkeys, all these sorts of things, they're all dead. No one cares, right? Because you got your palm. Boy, they put trees in its place. Same. No, it's not. That's not an ecosystem. Orangutans are dead, and they're not going to really live in palm seed oil crops, probably. And if they are, it's because they probably want to eat something there that they're growing, so they're going to get shot. So no, ethically, it's not a good idea. So on ethical, moral, environmental, and nutritional grounds, there is really no better way to go than eating meat. And that's the thing. You destroy an ecosystem to grow crops, but you improve the ecosystem and the environment and the soil health by bringing in animals. And Alan Savory is going around reversing deserts around the world for the last 40 years, 50 years, written textbooks on the subject. He's taking large groups of livestock, bunched and moving like a herd, taking them through deserts. And then the next year, they start growing more and then growing more and then growing more and then growing more. In Patagonia, they took 20,000 head of sheep through the deserts in Patagonia. The next year, there was 50% increase in vegetation. 50%. That's a lot, especially for a desert. And you come through again, and you come through again, you come through again, and all of a sudden you've got a nice, you don't have a desert anymore. You reversed a desert, and now other animals start migrating in, and now you have, a normal ecosystem again. Animals do that. Crop agriculture destroys that. And I think that that's where all the major deserts from the world came from as well. Iraq, Iran, the Middle East, Mesopotamia. This is where Samaria was, Babylon was. These are the ancient great civilizations. And this is where agriculture came from. And my God, was that a bad idea? So if you read Gilgamesh, it's the oldest written epic. And talks about the story of Gilgamesh, who was king, ruler of this city, sort of in that area. And they had these just big grass fields and things. It really sounded like African savanna or middle of America in the 1600s or something like that. Deer and antelope and wild animals and big tall grass and cedar trees that have never known an axe and all these sorts of things. And that is modern day Iraq, right? Not too many cedar forests in Iraq, right? Not too many verdant fields and plains with deer and antelope and gazelle and things like that. And then you have Egypt that also had a lot of agriculture, and the Persian Empire was all through that area, and that's what that was a big empire, and it sort of died out, and other things sort of took it over, probably because everything was turning to desert, and then people started moving on and started invading other places because it's not really inhabitable. And so Egypt was doing the same thing, but they had a different system there. So the Nile River would flood every year, and it would deposit silt and nutrients from upriver in those fields. And so that was taught to me as a kid. So every year the nutrients were replenished because of the flooding of the river. Well, that's great. What does that mean? Right? That means that it has to be replaced every year, right? Or else it will go fallow. It won't grow anything anymore. And so, if you're in an area that you don't have a Nile River, it doesn't flood, and you're just stripping out nutrients, and you're mining all these nutrients from the soil, and then now there's not enough, you're not going to grow that crop anymore. There's only a certain amount of rotations. If you're not using fertilizers or letting animals in the area, that there's only a certain number of crops that you can grow before you cannot grow that plant anymore, because it needs certain nutrients that do not exist in the soil anymore, right? And so other areas, they did that. In the middle of America, we started doing this widespread farming, and it just had just the right environment and wind and everything to really be a bad idea. And we started stripping away all the topsoil, started at the Dust Bowl era, where all the topsoil blew away or washed away because we were plowing the ground, digging it up, and then rain would hit and wash it all away. Wind would hit, blow it all away. You had these massive dust storms and locust swarms, and it sounded like a Bible story out of Egypt, right? And the middle of America was turning into a desert. It almost turned into another Sahara Desert. The Sahara Desert is a man-made desert, by the way. Not everyone knows that. That was not a desert before. You look down through infrared imaging from satellites, there were cities there, whereas now the cities and human installations all over what is now the Sahara Desert. That was not a desert before. And we figured it out during the Dust Bowl era in America. And we said, okay, look, this is from agriculture. We're losing topsoil because of the way we're plowing fields. And so we changed that. But we're still losing 27.5 billion tons of topsoil a year that take 500 years to grow a centimeter. So this is a vanishing resource. That's an area the size of Kentucky every year that we lose, right? So this is a big problem, right? And going back to Egypt, there was a study I remember seeing just on TV, on the news, when I was a kid in the 90s. They were talking about Egypt and the pyramids, and they said, okay, they're testing soil samples underneath the pyramids and underneath the Sphinx. And they said, okay, what sort of land was this built on? Were these desert people, like you're looking like, Moses and the 12 commandments or 10 commandments, movie, and it's all in deserts, and it's all like modern day Egypt. And they said, no, that's not what it was. This soil does not indicate that this was built in a desert. This indicates that it was built in a jungle. These were jungle people. These were jungle pyramids. And so this changes everything about how we should think about the pyramids and the Sphinx and the ancient Egyptians as well. And the fact that they had all these crops and all this agriculture, and it turned it all to hell, turned it all to deserts, right? Just like it did in Mesopotamia, the Persian Empire, and the middle of America. So the best thing you can do is massively increase the amount of meat that we produce, because that's going to improve the land. The more animals there are, the more nutrients getting in the soil, the more plants there can be, the more animals that it will support, the more fertile the land will be. And so the land will get better, we'll get better, and everything's going to be fine if we do that.
There's not much more I can say. I'll just take this mic that's in front of me and go clink.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Dr. Chaffee. And I'll just add the last little piece to that, is that I encourage folks to go follow Dr. Chaffee and become a member of his Patreon page, because they're reading a book which I think ties into that currently, which is The Vegetarian Myth by Lierre Keith. That's another big one that I often recommend folks that are struggling with wrapping their minds around adding animal foods back in their diet to go listen to someone that's experienced it and lived it and will talk so eloquently about it. So thank you again for all that you do. What more can I say, Dr. Chaffee? The last time you were here, I said, every day is a learning day. And man, I learned today. And I always do listening to you. It's always an honor and a privilege, sir, talking with you. And I want to thank you again for taking the time out to chat with us. It is so great. And I'm not sure that we'll talk before the end of the year again. So I want to wish you and your family the very best for the rest of the year and the upcoming holiday season, and say thank you. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you for your advocacy, and just keep doing what you're doing. Thank you, Dr. Chaffee.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you for having me. It's great to see you again, as always.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Take care, and we'll chat again soon.
Sounds good.
And that's a wrap on this episode of Carnivorist Chats. If you've made it this far, I want to say thank you for listening, and also thank you in advance for liking, subscribing, or sharing this episode. Thanks again to Equip Foods, Carnivore Snacks, and the Carnivore Bar. Don't forget to check the link in the show notes to get a discount on their products. Until the next time, be well.